Very good morning to all. On behalf of Bharati Vidyapeeth Pune College of Pharmacy, I welcome you all for the valedictory function of this AICTE-sponsored 2-week online quality improvement program titled Medication Safety in Clinical Practice. Today we have with us as chief guest Dr. A.G. Unnikrishnan, CEO of Chellaram Diabetes Institute, Pune. Welcome, sir, and thank you for gracing the occasion. We
Thank you.
also have with us Dr. A.P. Pawar, in charge principal and chief coordinator of QIP, Dr. Varsha Pokharkar, vice principal, and Dr. Janhavi Rao, vice principal, Pune College of Pharmacy. I now request Dr. Varsha Pokharkar ma'am to kindly give the opening remarks.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
So, very good morning to one and all. On behalf of Bharati Vidyapeeth Deemed University, Pune College of Pharmacy, I extend a warm welcome to the chief guest of today's program, Dr. Unnikrishnan, CEO of the Chellaram Diabetes Institute, Pune, our principal, Dr. Atmaram Pawar, Vice Principal, Dr. Janhavi Rao, all the delegates, faculty members, and students for the valedictory function of this 2 weeks AICT sponsored QIP entitled Medication Safety in Clinical Practice. Pune College of Pharmacy is a pioneering established institute imparting pharmacy education in the country with a very high national ranking in the top 25 as per the NIRF, and also is an NBA and NAC accredited institute. It imparts programs entitled the P Pharmacy program, M Pharmacy program in 7 branches, Pharm D program, as well as the B Pharm practice program and the PhD program in the 7 branches. It has a long established standing and also has been a center, recognized center from the AICT for the quality improvement program. And for the last more than 15 years, Pune College of Pharmacy has been conducting this quality improvement programs or the faculty development programs every year. In the last decade, we understand that pharmacy education has undergone considerable reforms to meet the challenges and the demand of the pharmacy professionals globally. The teaching faculty, therefore, are required to be updated in the knowledge as they teach new skills and develop new insights and approaches towards solving of the social problem with the nation faces. The primary purpose of this QIP or the faculty development program, therefore, is to focus on knowledge updation and advocating teaching strategies as recommended by the new education policy with relevance to the pharmacy education. The topic of this QIP program is very relevant in the current situation when the whole world is witnessing healthcare challenges. As pharmacy professionals, we have much to contribute towards ensuring the safety and efficacy of the medicines and achieving the optimum therapeutic benefit. Thus, this QIP program, organized over the period of 2 weeks, has totally focused on medication safety through clinical practice, and therefore, it is going to help the teachers to keep abreast with the latest developments as well as correlate their teaching to the prevailing practice as per the indigenous and the global requirements. So with this, I once again extend a warm welcome to all of you for this valedictory program. Welcome, Dr. Unnikrishnan sir, once again. And it's a pleasure to have you with us again, because I remember you had visited our college 2 years back or so, and it's a pleasure to have with us today again and guide us on this occasion. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving forward, I now request Dr. Manjusha Sajid to kindly present the report of the QIP.
Thank you, Preeti. A very warm good morning to the Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. A.G. Unnikrishnan Sir, the In-Charge Principal and Chief Coordinator, Dr. Atmaram Pawar Sir, Vice Principal, Dr. Varsha Pokaka Ma'am, Dr. Janvi Rao Ma'am, the faculties of Pune College of Pharmacy, and all the delegates present here. It gives me immense pleasure to present the summary of AICTE-sponsored 2-week quality improvement program on medication safety in clinical practice. QIP was conducted for 2 weeks from February 1st to February 13. Over 43 speakers had delivered talk on various aspects of medication safety in clinical practice, which also included 4 international speakers. The program was inaugurated by Guest of Honor, Mrs. Saili Masal Ma'am, Registrar, Maharashtra State Pharmacy Council, Mumbai, and Chief Guest Dr. Rahul Somani Sir, Head Global Pharmacovigilance, Alkene Laboratory Limited, Mumbai. All sessions were conducted in online. Every day, 4 sessions were conducted, and a session lasting around 45 minutes to 1 hour. The event was successfully conducted with 30 delegates from different parts of Maharashtra and outside Maharashtra. All sessions were interactive and delegates showed their zeal and enthusiasm throughout the lectures by being active listeners for the entire session. All the talks were mainly from the various domains of the pharmacy, which mainly focus on the clinical component of the medication safety. The delegates were mainly trained in the aspects of medication therapy management, medication reconciliation, safety of high alert medication, critical care drugs, pharmacovigilance, medication safety principles, adverse event and toxicity management. Sessions on pharmacogenomics, OTC medication safety, pharmacotherapy, management of obesity and lifestyle disorders also formed an integral component. Adverse event following immunization, ensuring vaccine effectiveness, clinical importance of therapeutic drug monitoring also played a vital role in the 2 weeks program. Ways to minimize adverse event following immunization, immunization errors, immunization anxiety-related reactions were discussed. Necessity of therapeutic drug monitoring in drugs that have narrow therapeutic index were illustrated very well. Role of evidence-based medicine and minimizing medication error also formed the highlight of the event. Demonstration of database like Micromedics, Lexicon, Clinirex, Puma software and medical devices were also conducted for the delegates. During the demonstration of these database, various search parameters were discussed, which comprised of drug safety, efficacy compared to other drugs, drug toxicity, contraindication, drug interaction, etc. Pharmacokinetics modeling also formed the highlight of the event, where various types of model, objectives of models were discussed. The session also made us realize that the pharmacokinetics models are used to predict optimum dosage regimen for each patient. The volunteers were given hands-on training on pharmacokinetics modeling by demonstrating the application of software Pumas. This demonstration was very useful in understanding the drug profile. The respiratory device demonstration comprised of demonstrating rotahalers and meter-dose inhaler. This enhanced the knowledge of how to use the device effectively to ensure maximum absorption of drug and what precautionary measures should be taken before and after the use of respiratory device. Sessions on topics like medical astrology, medication safety on pediatrics, and gynecology practice was also appealing. Some sessions also include case report by which theories were illustrated, as it could help the delegates in developing skills like problem solving and decision making in complex situations. Emerging alternative for the managing lifestyle disorders was an attractive topic, and various artificial intelligence tools to screen rare diseases and for drug discovery were discussed. Clinical safety of herbal drugs and interactive technology and automation to optimize quality and patient safety was also explained in a very simplified manner. Technology like automatic drug dispensers, electronic patient medication record, and barcoding system was quite exciting. To conclude with, I hope this QIP would help all the delegates in improving the aspects of medication safety. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Manjusha ma'am. We will move to the next part of the program where we would like to hear the feedback of some of our participants. So I will call out the names of a few participants. I request you to keep your feedback really short and crisp and limited to about 1 minute, not more than that. So the first participant we would like to hear is Dr. Sushil Kumar Londe.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, one and all. At this juncture, I take this opportunity to express few words on the wonderful journey on the quality improvement program on medication safety practices in clinical settings, which we all have cherished. The overall sessions conducted in the program were beneficial, relevant, and up to date for the current scenarios. The entire program was designed bearing in mind the need of pharmacy practice services to be implemented in the healthcare settings consistently. This program has been successful in imbibing and sensitizing the role of clinical pharmacists in the areas of pharmaceutical care, pharmacovigilance, medication therapy management, medication errors, and the ways to implement in clinical practice, especially the medication errors, which affect a large number of patients with the risk of causing severe patient harm. And these errors can occur at any step in the medication use process from ordering and post-administration and monitoring. The QIP has been very efficient in terms of the idea, which is leading many of us to a safe clinical practice and management. It made me realize that how much medication reconciliation is important for safety practices. Through some sessions, I came across the medication safety in children and the adverse events on the immunization, such as ensuring the vaccine effectiveness, which was containing comprehensive information, which was rendered in a beautiful way to acknowledge. So it's my privilege to thank the organizing committee, Dr. Atmaram Pawar sir, Principal sir, Dr. Manjusha Shajit, Program Coordinator, and other coordinators for wonderfully organizing the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I call upon now Dr. Ashish Kulkarni.
Madam?
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank Pune College of Pharmacy for organizing this 2 weeks QIP program on the very current topic, that is medication safety in clinical practice, which is a very important one from the patient's point of view as well as the pharmacist's point of view to upgrade their knowledge in this latest topic, which is very much sometimes neglected, and that may, of course, that patient is suffered because of these reasons. This particular aspects in the clinical practice, that is very important and very good sessions that were organized, which really I think that fills the gaps that is currently associated in our curriculum. And that will really helpful as a teacher to pass this knowledge to our students, especially in the area of clinical practice, pharmacovigilance, adverse events, as well as the role of these pharmacists in the monitoring the control, especially in the area like in case of obesity, rheumatoid arthritis, critical care drugs. So that is which is very essential, and this particular gap that is filled by this QIP as a teacher we learn in this particular session, as well as the demonstration that was organized will really help us. That gives hands-on experience, learning experience, and it will surely help us to pass this particular knowledge to our students. So I will thank once again the organizers, Dr. Manjusha Madam team, and also I want to thank Dr. Prasanna sir to give a new angle, that is astrology, use of astrology in the management of the case studies. So that give really a different experience and a different angle to manage this patient care. So I want to thank once again all of the Pune College of Pharmacy team for organizing this QIP. Thank you once again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. Saurabh Sanghavi to kindly. express his thoughts.
Hello, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
First of all, good morning to all. My name is Professor Saurabh Sanghavi, working as Assistant Professor in SVM College of Pharmacy, Malegaon, Baramati District, Pune. First, I would like to thank AICT, then Bharati Vidyapeeth, Pune College of Pharmacy, Pune, then Dr. A.P. Pawar sir and the coordinator, respected Manjusha ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to attend such a wonderful 15 days AICT sponsored QIP. Now, regarding the sessions, all sessions are on time and on the time also. The coordinators are very helpful and cooperative, and the best team and the time management I have seen throughout this QIP. Whenever I required the help or from the coordinators or from the team, they help me a lot. After that, regarding the sessions, all the sessions are highly informative, knowledgeable because of the best speakers that you have selected, and we got everyone got so much information from this QIP, and I think from this QIP, whatever the information we got, that will really helpful to us, to all our students also for their career and their in their future personal life also. Then as I said, all sessions are very informative, and it is little bit difficult for me even to say the which sessions which are the best or which I like most, even though the sessions which I like most are emerging alternative ways for managing lifestyle disorder, clinical safety of herbal drugs, basic of medical astrology and case discussion, pharmacokinetics and the safety of drugs, medical safety in elderly patients, etc. So once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to express my views, and a very special thanks to respected Manjusha ma'am for considering my application even at the last case. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Preeti ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I now call upon Dr. Narendra Parihar.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. So, good morning, one and all. Myself, Narendra Parihar. I work as an assistant professor in Modern College of Pharmacy, Pune. I would like to thank Dr. Atmaram Pawar sir and organizer Dr. Manjusha ma'am for giving me this opportunity to attend this QIP program for 2 weeks. So, I would like to tell that overall sessions were very good and informative. I felt like enthusiastic while attending all the sessions. I gained more knowledge about the how the safety is very important in medical practice, whether it is a hospital pharmacist, whether it is a clinical pharmacist, or it is a community pharmacist. So we have to take very precautions while giving medicines to the patients in hospital or in community. So once again, I thanks all the organizers and thanks to the Pune College of Pharmacy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last delegate we would like to call upon is Dr. Rupali Patil.
Very good morning, one and all. Myself, Dr. Rupali Patil, associated with Gokhale Education Society's College of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Nasik, as an associate professor. Ma'am, as I already said during introduction, that to attend the QIPs at Bharati is always like full of knowledge and various different things we used to learn over there in this QIPs arranged by Bharati Vidyapeeth. Because the resource persons specifically, they are of such a high level that whatever they are talking about, the sessions, they are always full of different kind of terminologies, knowledge and concepts basically. So I would like to thank Bharati Vidyapeeth, University's Pune College of Pharmacy, AICT for this wonderful QIP on medication safety in clinical practice, because during this COVID pandemic, we really come to know the importance of safety of medications, because as we tried various medicines during this COVID, because not a perfect drug that was available, though we repurposed the drugs, but their safety that played important role during this period. And throughout this 1 year, we came to know the importance of safety, and as a pharmacist, what is our role in the medications basically. And as this QIP started with the guest of honor, Saili Masal ma'am and Somani sir, both they are actively involved in pharmacovigilance, and ma'am, she is registrar of Maharashtra State Pharmacy Council, Mumbai. So they do elaborated on the safety of medications. Pawar sir, Atmaram Pawar sir, Honorable Pawar sir, Sir's knowledge in the field of OTC, that is tremendous, and Sir's books, they are also important. They are spreading the knowledge throughout the layman as they are in Marathi specifically. So Sir's session was also ultimate. I'm thankful to all the resource persons of this QIP as they thrown a different light on different areas of this medication safety. Bodhankar sir do talk about the TDM, Kera sir, and adverse drug reactions. So many important topics they were discussed during this QIP. So I'm really thankful to the program coordinator, Manjusha ma'am, all the team of this QIP for nicely arranging this QIP. Timely sessions were there, and like it was like bundle of knowledge. Okay, so thankful. I'm thankful to all, and thanks for giving me opportunity to share my views in this valedictory function. Thank you so much, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, madam. Moving forward, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you all our chief guest for today, Dr. A.G. Unnikrishnan. Sir is an endocrinologist and the CEO of Chalaram Diabetes Institute, Pune, which is a leading diabetes institute in India and an IDF certified center for education and excellence in diabetes care. He heads the clinical care research education and also oversees a philanthropic rural diabetes care program at the institute. The institute's work in remote communities via mobile diabetes clinics operating in a hub and spoke manner in remote parts of Western India has been highly appreciated. He has published the largest multi-center study of subjects with pancreatitis and pancreatic diabetes worldwide, in addition to his many other publications. He is also the former editor-in-chief and founder editor of the Journal of Thyroid Research and Practice. He is executive director of Indian Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism. He has more than 160 publications in indexed journals. He has received the Subhash Mukherjee Oration Award of the Endocrine Society of India and the Srivastava Award of the RSSDI, which is the largest diabetes society, for his contribution to diabetes in India. He has also received the Jacob Memorial Prize for the Best Patient Care Award by the Christian Medical College, Vellore, in 1998. He has received the Fellowship Award of the RSSDI in 2017 and the Dr. Sam G.P. Moses Oration Award by the Diabetes Society of India in 2018. Recently, he has received the Diabetes Excellence Award in Digital Diabetes Summit at Hyderabad in 2019. With this brief introduction, I now request Sir to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Preeti. It is a pleasure being here, and my greetings to all the eminent people who are here, and especially to Dr. Atmaram Pawar, Sir, the principal in charge, Dr. Varsha Pokarkar, Dr. Janvi Rao, Dr. Manjusha Sajit, and Ms. Preeti Tamane, and of course, all the faculty members who have participated in this very unique 2-week AICT-sponsored quality improvement program conducted by the Pune College of Pharmacy. I had the opportunity to visit the Pune College of Pharmacy at a similar meeting. Of course, that was a face-to-face meeting, and I really enjoyed the world-class facilities which had been on display when I visited. And it is a fantastic institute and a dream institute for faculty of pharmacy to work at. And I continue to wish the institute all the best. And once more, thanks to Dr. Atmaram Pawar and the team for inviting me here. I'm going to talk about, instead of talking about general aspects of pharmacy, because I'm talking to pharmacists who know all about medicines, let me try to bring some personal perspectives on diabetes. So this will be my short agenda for today. I will introduce diabetes. And just as a refresher, to say that somebody has diabetes, the fasting plasma glucose needs to be more than 126. 2 hours after 75 grams glucose, the glucose value needs to be more than 200. And today, to diagnose diabetes, patient need not fast. If you can just do this test called HbA1c, which can be done in the morning, afternoon, night, it will tell you whether the patient has got diabetes or not. If the HbA1c is more than 6.5, that means the person is diabetic. Occasionally, a patient comes and tells me, "Doctor, my fasting is 180 today because yesterday night I had some pastry." But if the HbA1c is high, I can tell the patient, "Dekho, your blood glucose is high, not because you had a pastry yesterday, because your 3-month average is high, you have diabetes." So that's the value of HbA1c, which reflects long-term hyperglycemia. So why should we treat diabetes? Because diabetes affects the nerves, the kidneys, the eyes, and the heart and the cardiovascular system. So it causes neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, and heart disease. Not to forget that it also increases the risk of infections such as COVID, and diseases like COVID are most severe in people with diabetes. This is just a story of a patient, a 63-year-old gentleman, 63-year-old lady who came with diabetes. And you can see she complained of burning and numbness of the feet. You can see the A1C is 10.8. Very sadly, in India, many people visit a doctor when their blood glucose is high, and the blood glucose is really very high. You can see the fasting sugar is itself 162. When we looked at her feet, these are tests to know whether the patient's blood flow is affected. This is to assess the neuropathy, and we give electrical impulses, vibration impulses to the leg, and you can see that she has mild loss of vibratory sensation. Only when the impulse is about 9 microvolt, she is able to sense. This is very important because people who have impaired sensation to the feet, they may have an injury. Related education is very important. You can see there is mild diabetic neuropathy, and she was given insulin. There are several insulins now. This is a new type of insulin, which has got a long-acting component and an ultra-rapid acting component. Of course, we had to do pan-retinal photocoagulation of the eye, which means we treat the retinopathy and the retina improves. And screening for kidney disease is done by microalbuminuria test. And with diet, exercise, and medication, this patient's HbA1c came down from 10.8 to 7.8, which is not brilliant because we need to keep the HbA1c at least below 7% in people with diabetes. Diet, exercise are the fundamentals of treatment, followed by metformin, and of course, we have other drugs. So you can see the glucose readings coming down, and I want to talk a little bit about diabetes in rural parts of Western India. And this is a hub and spoke model, which we do in our hospital, where, as you can see, we have a mobile clinic in the main village. From the main village, the mobile clinic goes to the smaller village, screens and treats patients, and comes back to the big village. So when one hub and all the spokes are over, our team migrates to the next hub. So this is our mobile diabetes clinic. You can see this clinic, and you can see we work with the ASHA workers. We train the government ASHA workers, as you can see, to go house to house and screen people and bring them for follow-up to the day when the clinic visits. So in the mobile clinic, we have a fundus camera, and the fundus camera screens for diabetic retinopathy. And we have a biotissue meter, and you can see the biotissue meter screens for diabetic neuropathy. We do the glucometer test, and we have an ECG which screens for heart disease, and we register the patient, etc., etc. What we found is that almost 11% of the pregnant women we screen have gestational diabetes, which is a form of diabetes that happens in pregnancy. Diabetic foot is seen in 16% of people with diabetes. 14% have known diabetes, and 4% have undiagnosed diabetes. This is not the prevalence of diabetes in rural Pune, but this is the prevalence of diabetes in a high-risk screening program, because our ASHA workers screen people for diabetes, and people at high risk are brought to the clinics. And eye problems, retina problems, were seen in 11% of the diabetic population. So this is introduction to diabetes and the complications. Let's look at diabetes management in India. There are challenges. This is a paper we published, which looks at regional disparities in urban India. And you can find that across India, the HbA1c is really high in people with diabetes and very small proportion have control. And this is a cross-sectional study. We found that diabetes-related complications are very common, whether you look at neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, cardiovascular disease. So foot problems, kidney problems, retina problems, cardiovascular disease, all very common. And the average HbA1c in Indian people is about 8.9%. You can see this gentleman here. He visits our mobile clinic, and when he came the first time, you can see he has had an amputation. And because his foot was not dressed, he has put a plastic cover and tied it up to the foot. And the other leg, you can see bandage, which means this patient is at risk of bilateral foot amputation. I can give several stories of patients in rural parts of India who have very little access to healthcare. So what we found is that prevalence of diabetes in rural India is supposed to be at 13%, but the problem is not just cost, it's about access, awareness, and trained personnel. And half of this 13% is known cases, half is unknown cases. This is a paper by Chow and Reddy et al. Published in Diabetes Care. In our experience, there is no point in screening everybody for diabetes. If you first do a high-risk questionnaire and then screen the high-risk people for diabetes, you can pick up a higher percentage of cases. So this is our experience in the community. So as you can see, we train the ASHA workers who go to the big village. From the big village, they go to the smaller village, go house to house, bring patients to our mobile clinic. The mobile clinic, we register the patients, screen them, and give them a treatment plan. And what we found is that when we screened about 17,000, 1 lakh population was visited, 17,000 was screened, and we published this paper many years back when we brought the high risk 17,000 people for screening. We found that 3,490 had either known or undetected diabetes. So by using a high risk screening approach, rather than screening the whole population, by a simple questionnaire, and this questionnaire is available online, you can pick up 20% of the people who visit the mobile clinic have diabetes. And this is the outline of our mobile clinic. This is a registration, examination, and assessment. And we found that this is very useful, and the cost of screening is only about 200 rupees if you do that. And this was appreciated in the ICMR's document published several years back, that to screen for diabetes, we need to go to the periphery. So recently we published this paper in 2020, which looked at the prevalence of obesity in rural India. We found that obesity is prevalent in rural India, and you can see that 26% of the rural population is obese, because even in rural India, because of mechanization, tractors, availability of soft cold drinks, fizzy drinks, and high energy foods, even available in rural India, the prevalence of obesity has gone up. And we also found that this high prevalence of obesity in rural India is associated with a higher risk of new onset hypertension and new onset diabetes. So nearly 1 in 10, you can see that as the BMI increases, diabetes and hypertension goes up. 1 in 10 population had new onset diabetes, obese population, and obesity was associated with newly diagnosed hypertension as well. So it's not just in urban India. We know that in urban India, people are eating junk food and not exercising, but even in rural India, the occurrence of diabetes is increasing. So we try to design a new way forward. And this is a paper I published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which looked at non-physician care coordinators. So we looked at the importance of, non-physician people. So we are looking at not just dietitians or paramedical workers or physiotherapists. Even I think pharmacists have a key role to play in medication adherence medication safety assessment. And I remember many years back when I was a professor of endocrinology at a hospital called Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, many of the Farm D students, the Farm D students used to come with us on rounds and discuss medication. What we found is that with the help of non-physician care coordinators, we were able to achieve multiple risk factor control. The p-value was significant, HbA1c control, a blood pressure control, and LDL control. Doctors are not the answers to the problem in society, and I think it's a team effort, and I think the pharmacy team has a huge role to play in clinical pharmacy. And I based on this paper which we published, this was done in both India and Pakistan, and we thought that a similar project could help in rural India. So with the help of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and of course the Maharashtra Arogya Bhavan, Public Health Foundation of India, which is an evaluation partner, and of course the Chalaram Diabetes Institute and the district health office, we conducted this trial, a comparative study to see whether empowering ASHA workers, not metformin, not sitagliptin, not glimepiride, but all tablets plus diet and exercise, plus simple empowering patients by ASHA workers in diet and exercise, will it help? So this was called Project Diabetes with Dignity. And we trained the ASHA workers. You can see our ASHA workers being trained, and we brought out a manual for ASHA worker training. And this was the design of the study. We screened 5,000 people in each group. 300 odd people were enrolled in one group, one cluster of villages around a PHC. We gave them standard treatment. What is, just go to the government PHC and take your medicine and then see after 6 months. And in the intervention arm, patient went to the PHC, but within the 6 months, the patient went to the primary health center, but within the 6 months, we told the patient to be visited every month, house to house visit by the ASHA worker who would inculcate diet advice, exercise advice, medication adherence, glucometer testing, blood pressure testing, making the patient aware of the importance of taking medicines on time. So with all these things, we wanted to see if we could reach outcomes. And these were the results. We presented this at the International Diabetes Federation Congress. We found that in the intervention group, the HbA1c came down, whereas in the control group, the HbA1c went up. You can see in the green color in the intervention group. So along with standard treatment, visit house to house by a field worker reduced A1C from 8.8 to 8.2, whereas in the control group, just seeing patients seen by a doctor and telling the patient come after 6 months actually increased A1C. And this was, as you can see, statistically significant. That led us to the next question. We also looked at other aspects. We looked at LDL cholesterol, and what we learned is that with the help of community health workers and the Project Diabetes with Dignity intervention, we showed that simple going to the patient's house, educating them about diabetes, doing a glucometer test, checking the blood pressure, giving them diet, exercise advice, telling them about medication safety, cautioning them about hypoglycemia with certain medicines, that itself had an impact on glucose control. And maybe this is the way forward. This Pune model may be the way forward for diabetes management. It's not the doctors sitting in big hospitals alone that can help. So I'd like to thank a lot of people who were involved in this project. The Chalaram, my colleagues at the Chalaram Diabetes Institute, the Diabetes with Dignity team, Sanofi team, Public Health Foundation of India, which is, we decided that our work should not be evaluated by us, but should be evaluated by a third party, and the Public Health Foundation of India did that. I thank the Arogya Bhavan in Bombay, the civil surgeon and team in Pune, the district health officer, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And let's look at another aspect, how we looked at a new way forward. Now, we all know that when the COVID pandemic hit us, patients were worried about visiting hospital. Patients thought, oh, I will get COVID if I come to hospital. So how to manage patients? And we know that patients require care. So we decided how to manage patients remotely, and we decided to go for telehealth. And I thought in the next few slides, I will just discuss some of our experiences in telemedicine, in remote diabetes management. So here is a 33-year-old lady with high blood glucose. She was pregnant, and at 25 weeks of pregnancy, she came to us. You know, in gestational diabetes is diabetes occurring between in the second trimester of pregnancy, that is 12 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. So this was a classic case of gestational diabetes. A woman who is not known to be diabetic now becomes diabetic during pregnancy. Why does she become diabetic during pregnancy? She becomes diabetic during pregnancy because of the diabetogenic effects of pregnancy hormones like estrogen, progesterone, HCG, so on and so forth. So this is called gestational diabetes. Diabetes occurring between 24 to 28 weeks and getting better after delivery. But this patient, important to note, had several cycles of intrauterine insemination and IVF failing. So this was a very precious pregnancy, and her blood glucose levels were high during that precious pregnancy because she had many, many bad pregnancy outcomes earlier. So the gynecologist referred this patient to us. Her father had diabetes and her sugar was high. You know, the fasting was 93. In a non-pregnant person, if the fasting is more than 126, we say diabetes. But in pregnancy, a fasting of more than 92 is called gestational diabetes. And after a glucose load, more than 140 is high. So her glucose levels are 93 and 225, very high. But because it was a precious pregnancy and she was worried about COVID, you know, many people are worried about COVID. So she was worried about commuting to our hospital and she was scared and she said, can we help her through telemedicine? So what we did is, this was her case, and we published this in the Journal of Diabetology, Telemedicine for Initial Management of Newly Diagnosed Gestational Diabetes. This paper is just published a few months back. And we initially started her on metformin. Metformin is not the first line in pregnancy. It's diet and exercise. In US, it's diet and exercise and insulin. But in Europe, in the United Kingdom, it's diet and exercise, metformin and insulin. So we started on a very low dose of metformin because we were seeing her on telemedicine, and we told her to check the glucometer. The newer glucometers connect to the mobile phone, and we can also track through the cloud the glucometer values by our diabetes educator. So she did glucose reading 6 times a day, and you can see the initial readings were high, 156, with metformin, which was twice daily, and diet and exercise. Many of the pregnancy-related diabetes is postprandial. Post-meal glucose levels are high. So you can see with good diet control, the blood glucose came down. The post-breakfast came down. Post-lunch came down from 150 to about 140 odd. The post-dinner came down from 144 to 114. So by simple diet adjustment, eating small frequent meals and physical activity, you can manage lots and lots of cases of gestational diabetes. So we managed this patient purely by telemedicine, and the patient had a very good outcome. She eventually delivered a healthy baby. Why should you treat diabetes in pregnancy? Important to note that if the blood glucose levels are high, now glucose crosses from the mother to the baby. Insulin cannot cross. So if the mother's blood glucose levels are high, glucose can cross to the baby, and baby may have fetal malformations, abortions, and also baby may be born big in size. We call it fetal macrosomy. So the baby is born big in size if the glucose levels are high. Cesarean section rates are higher. Baby may require ICU care for neonatal newborn respiratory distress syndrome. Sometimes when the baby is born, because the mother's glucose supply is cut off, the baby may get even low sugar. So lot of reasons why we should treat diabetes in pregnancy. And this was a case. In this publication, we presented a series of cases where we managed pregnancy-related diabetes by telemedicine, and you can see the sugars coming down very well. These were the cases we managed, and you can see the reports. Now, this is another lady who came to us through telemedicine, a diabetes patient. hypothyroid also, had spine surgery, had retinal problem, and took video consultation. You can see the HbA1c was 10% in July, that's in the middle of the pandemic. Fasting was 285, and she was on mixture of two insulins in the morning and evening. So what we did is that the ideal way to manage diabetes is to give a long-acting insulin like glargine, because in the normal body, you can find that insulin is produced throughout the day. With each meal, you require a burst of insulin. So we gave her a long-acting insulin and short-acting insulins multiple times a day. And then we saw her and we adjusted the dose of insulin and we could control the blood sugar and it came down reasonably well. So this is a new technology in diabetes. Many patients can wear a sensor on their shoulder. It's called a glucose sensor, continuous glucose monitor. And you can see that it gives a blood sugar level across the day. So you can see in the initial part, the blood glucose levels were high. You'll see that the average glucose level was 240. And you can see at the time of 14th day, after changing the insulin to several insulin injections a day, the glucose range came down from 240 to 140. But what is important to note is that there is a new measure of glucose control, which all of you should know. This is going to be as important as HbA1c. It is called the time in range. What proportion of sugar is in target? So you can see initially her time in target was 0. What is time in target? If you take 70 to 180 as normal, if all the blood glucose levels are more than 180, time in target is 0, because 0% of the time the sugar is in control. The number of readings between 70 to 180, the percentage of time glucose readings that are normal is called time in target. It is recommended that for an elderly patient, the time in target should be at least 50%. You can see in this patient, we achieved a time in target of 50%. So time in target will replace HbA1c in time, because in this sensor, which measures blood glucose levels almost, every 15 minutes, and you can see the glucose readings were pretty good. So you can see this lady had good glucose control. And this is a third patient. And again, this is a patient who came to us with a toe injury over telemedicine. He had diabetes for 10 years. He had nerve damage and he was taking oral drugs. And he continued his glucose levels regularly and visited a doctor. We published this paper also I think last month, October, we published it. We used telepodiatry for diabetic foot management. So during the COVID pandemic, he had injury on the left big toe. He self-dressed it with antibiotic creams, and he found that it was oozing with pus. He went to a local doctor, and then it did not get better. So he consulted our physician online, and he shared an image of the wound. You can see that this was a wound. And this wound, we told him that we gave him a simple antibiotic, amoxicillin clavulanic acid, and we told him how to dress the wound. But here, to all of you, I want to give a simple new concept. Many times we see a diabetic foot wound. Many doctors tell the patient, "Ha, theek hai, thoda sa chalo, sugar bhi control ho jayega." But a patient with a diabetic foot wound should not walk. It is called offloading. And it is the most important treatment for diabetic foot ulcers. Simple offloading, giving rest to the wound. Tell the patient not to walk, not even to put the foot on the ground if possible. That will do wonders to care. So offloading, antibiotics, and rest, and of course, good glucose control. You can see that this wound, which was oozing pus, of course, here you can see that it is red because we taught him to clean it. With rest and antibiotics, you can see the wound really healed. You will see the series of papers we published in the Journal of Diabetes and Metabolic Syndrome just a few months back. In October 2020, we published series of telepodiatry. But telepodiatry is not suitable for many cases. Only when the patient is not able to visit a hospital, telepodiatry is good. What is telepodiatry? Telepodiatry means diabetic foot management via telemedicine. So telepodiatry is important only when patient is not able to visit a hospital. So we suggested that once the patient has a foot problem, if it is complicated, if there is infection, if there is foot ulcer, there are joint problems, they should visit a hospital. Even if there is only a very mild infection or injury, ideally they should visit a hospital. But sometimes patient is far off, not able to visit, or sometimes there is some pandemic-like situation, patient is afraid to visit. Then you should try to manage. But wherever possible, they should visit the hospital. And this is the guideline which we published. And of course, recently, this is just a few days back, I was happy to be part of the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR's valuable document on non-communicable disease management via telemedicine. So this is a framework for telemedicine management for cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and stroke in Indian people. And I was a contributor to the diabetes care section of this ICMR's document for telemedicine practice guidelines in India for non-communicable diseases. This is published just a few days ago, and I encourage all of you to visit the ICMR website. And this is by the National Center for Disease Informatics and Research, because this is something new. And the pandemic, while it has all given us a tough time, our patients have suffered, the non-COVID patients have also suffered, chronic diseases have suffered. But the silver lining is the pandemic has led to the digital transformation of healthcare. Even I can see this wonderful AICT sponsored quality improvement program is now digital. So we are going to see artificial intelligence coming into healthcare, telemedicine coming into health. Well, I'm not a big believer in telemedicine for all patients. I still like my patients to come and visit me face to face. But the fact is that to some extent, digital healthcare is going to come into play. And all of us need to be aware. Online pharmacies are increasing. Online health is becoming important. The government is pushing for digital health. I think that is very, very valuable because many people say that will artificial intelligence take over the job of a doctor or pharmacist or nurse? Never. Artificial intelligence cannot take over, or telemedicine cannot replace the warmth and the human aspect of healthcare. The very fact when I take a stethoscope and put it on the patient's chest, or I check the pulse of a patient, that human touch cannot be replaced by any artificial intelligence or telemedicine or robot. But what artificial intelligence can do is it can help in decision making when decision making is complex. So a good doctor or a good clinical pharmacist who is empowered with artificial intelligence is better than a good doctor or a good clinical pharmacist who is not empowered with artificial intelligence. So this will not take away a job. Yes, some jobs like radiology or pathology, artificial intelligence may have a good role to play. But people like us, who, like doctors and clinical pharmacists, who day-to-day interact with patients, I think that jobs will still, artificial intelligence cannot take away the job. So I'm a big believer in face-to-face visits. So friends, I'd like to conclude by saying that diabetes is alarmingly increasing in India. More than 70 million Indian people have had diabetes. Diabetes is associated with complications such as kidney, heart, eyes, feet, and infections. There are challenges in diabetes management in India: accessibility, affordability, and let us always think of what is the best way to manage diabetes for the poorest of the poor. Our experience in the community has been that using community health workers, both in the urban setting and the rural setting, I showed you the papers I published where non-physician care coordinators may help in improving care, because diabetes, whether we like it or not, is going to the patient. Diet, exercise, unique forms of diet, intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, low-carb diet. Diabetes is going to the patients, and we need to be aware of that. And just a doctor, a diabetic person, every day has a challenge. You know, when a sweet is in front of him or her, or when they see a pastry, or when they go to a function. So the day-to-day little challenges have to be helped by coaching and counseling. And that's why we feel that non-doctor care coordinators are important. And I also showed you how our unique mobile diabetes clinic program and also our efforts in telemedicine and telepodiatry and telemedicine for diabetes management may be a small, humble step in the management of diabetes in future. I'd like to thank all my colleagues at the Chalaram Diabetes Institute and the coordinators I'd also like to thank the Pune College of Pharmacy, Dr. Atmaram Pawar, Dr. Varsha, Dr. Manjusha Sajid, Dr. Janvi Rao, Preeti Tamane, all of you for giving me this opportunity. It has been an absolute pleasure discussing these aspects with you. Thank you for listening to me. And happy to be part of this wonderful, wonderful meeting. Thank you for calling me as chief guest for this valedictory function.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very insightful and informative talk. We are really inspired to know about your work in the field of diabetes, your innovative methods of telemedicine, telepodiatry, as well as mobile clinics are sure to be very effective means of diabetes management. And also thank you for sharing your views on the use of artificial intelligence and its role in the coming times in the field of healthcare management. So thank you very much once again, sir, for your talk and for your time today.
Thank you.
Moving forward, we would like to present to you a very short video about the last 2 weeks of the QIP.
Preeti, sorry to interrupt you. If anybody, any delegates have any questions, you can. I think Dr. Unnikrishnan can.
Happy to answer if there are any
Yeah.
questions, please.
Just short, quick questions if anybody has.
Participants are requested to unmute themselves in case they need to ask the questions.
I have one question, Dr. Unnikrishnan, that it was really interesting from you to know that how you have adopted the technology, particularly in this pandemic times, and the use of telemedicine, and interesting to know that you could, get very good publication, and the outcome was very good basically out of that. So how was the response from overall patients? I mean, they were readily adopting this new technique, because both doctors also are little not so much conversant with technology probably, and there is a hesitancy in adopting these kind of technologies. So what was your experience on that? I mean, whether people are ready to go for these newer methods?
So yes, people are going to ready to go because it's a simple WhatsApp video call. But as a doctor, I find it very, very difficult. So I like telemedicine only if the patient is on follow-up and if it's a very simple thing like adjusting the dose of a medicine like thyroid or sugar medicines. Seeing a new patient on telemedicine is very challenging.
Right.
But very interestingly, I want to say two things. One is that I learned how to assess if a patient is sick on telemedicine, because during my MBBS, I was told to check the pulse and BP. But here I could look at a few things. I was looking at how fast the patient is speaking. Is the patient breathless while talking? How is the family support of the patient? Is the patient walking, talking? How active the patient is? And second is that it is important to build a human relationship with the patient.
Right.
That is very easy when you see face to face. 1 second and you can make a connection. But telemedicine, you have to use unique strategies. You'll have to ask the patient, how are you today? Sometimes, the patient will bring his father or his children or his brothers and sisters, introduce you over telemedicine.
Yeah.
Doctor aaye hain, please aake mil lijiye hamare logon se. So you will have to have some sort of a social connection, and only then the treatment will work. So frankly, if you give me a choice, I don't want telemedicine. I want patient to come and visit me, because that's what I like.
Right.
But during this period, patients are so panicky, they are worried. So from that perspective, newer ways of diagnosis, clinical assessment, and building a human rapport, these two are interesting challenges in telemedicine.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's really appreciable that you could really make use of this technology and go on with your interventions and get a good therapeutic outcome out of it. So really congratulate you on that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, what is the role of preventive lifestyle in case of diabetes, because we know that it has to do with genetic predisposition. In fact, my father is diabetic, so I always have it at the back of my mind, will someday I turn into a diabetic, or should I take any precautions in my lifestyle which may prevent it later.
So this is very important, because if both parents, for example, have type 2 diabetes, the chance of the child developing type 2 diabetes in adulthood, when they grow up to be an adult, is nearly 90 to 100% today in India. That's because in India, pre-diabetes has to be assessed and treated. Now, why I did not talk much about pre-diabetes? Pre-diabetes is a condition of high blood glucose, but not high enough to be called diabetes. HbA1c of 5.7 to 6.4 is called pre-diabetes. 6.5 and higher is diabetes, but 5.7 to 6.4 is called pre-diabetes. Similarly, you have similar values for blood glucose also. Now, there are two studies. One is the Diabetes Prevention Program in the US and the Indian Diabetes Prevention Program. These two studies compared diet and lifestyle versus metformin for pre-diabetes. The Diabetes Prevention Program both showed similar results. The Diabetes Prevention Program showed that diet and exercise can prevent the progression of pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes by 58%. Metformin tablet can prevent it by 31%. So diet and exercise, I feel that a low, I won't say keto diet, I won't say low carb diet, but a lower carbohydrate diet. Whatever carbohydrate we are eating, if you just reduce it, that will be an important step. Increasing your fiber intake, 150 minutes of physical exercise a week. This is enough to prevent diabetes in the majority of people. Well, eating lesser times a day in some people seems to help. The so-called 2 days a meal diet seems to help in people who are obese, who are not disciplined. But I think eating good, healthy food in small quantities, cutting down the carbohydrate, exercising at least 150 minutes a week, all this will really help the progression of pre-diabetes to diabetes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Preeti, can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for a wonderful session and a very informative lecture on diabetes. Sir, I want to know, in continuation with Preeti's question, that lifestyle disorders. Now, whenever we find that diabetes is there, or diabetic patients are there, or we are in pre-diabetic zone, so in our natural household, they suggest that start taking Karela or Neem or Jamun or natural remedies. So whether these will be beneficial if we add in our diet uh, for to increase our or to improve our lifestyle, or what is the role of these homemade remedies?
So I can answer as a doctor here, because I think that these remedies have an important role to play. But it is important to set the patient's perspective correctly. Many patients think that by eating Karela, their sugar will become normal. No. But if you are replacing an extra 2 spoons of rice, and instead of that, you are substituting it with Karela, or if you are removing potato as a curry or as a side dish and replacing it with Karela, while the potato will spike up the sugar, Karela may even bring it down a little bit. That seems to have an important impact. So yes, as a replacement for unhealthy foods, Karela, Jamun, all these things have effect. Now, some of my patients say, Karela khane ke baad I went into hypoglycemia. Yes, an occasional patient will still be able to tell you that, but you will find that it is overall to do with the overall calorie reduction and lifestyle modification that has happened. So I think you'll have to look at it as an important adjunct to the diet. That's how I look at it as a doctor.
Yeah, because it is observed that Karela juice, say 50 ml, is good for someone, and it may not be good for the other patient. So
that's also interesting. There is this gut microbe.
Yeah.
So we are not alone. We have almost 1 trillion gut bacteria on our skin and in the gut. So sometimes because of that, a patient may respond differently. Patient number A may respond different from patient number B.
Definitely.
For example, we know we don't recommend banana that commonly in diabetes. But when we do this continuous glucose monitoring, I showed you a diagram of a continuous monitor which checks the blood sugar 15 minutes a day. Patient wears it on the skin, and they can see it on their mobile phone. So I found that one patient, after eating banana, the sugar doesn't go up at all. but after eating roti, the sugar goes up. That's because of the unique nature of the gut bacteria of that person. And that is a altogether different topic, the gut microbiome. And because of that, patient A may respond very well to say Karela, where another patient may not respond. Right now, science has not reached a situation where we can say this patient will benefit from this therapy. But in future, you will see with nutrigenomics and gut microbiome studies and artificial intelligence knowing the behavioral aspect of the patient and the family history and the social aspect, you will see this personalized nutrition and pharmacotherapy coming up in a big way.
Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Yes.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, there have been, which is quite popular out in Pune, the freedom from diabetes. So where they would give you palak and other thing juice in the morning, and then like you are supposed to be off on milk products. And how would you connect this with spike in sugar levels?
So I'm not a big fan of the freedom from diabetes program because, one thing is that they say don't eat anything white or drink anything white. So milk and milk products are out and it's almost like a vegan diet.
Yeah.
In a short term, everybody's sugar comes down. They are able to stop insulin. They are able to stop tablets. In 3 to 6 months, everything is good. But at the end of 1 to 2 years, this sort of an artificial diet causes blood glucose to come up. At that point, the freedom from diabetes team puts patient on gliclazide and vildagliptin and metformin, which is nothing but diabetes therapies. Second, I've seen many people who have become very thin, frail, and weak. The goal of diabetes treatment is not just sugar control. Some patients, once they are on this freedom from diabetes and similar programs, I'm not taking freedom from diabetes alone, there are similar programs, they become extremely thin, weak, and frail. They look up as if they have become older by 10 to 15 years. But they'll show you, mera sugar to bahut acha control mein hai. No, that's not what we want. We want the patient to be healthy, to have a healthy, glowing skin, to have enough muscles. We know that milk has got a lot of nutritious values. One good thing about the freedom from diabetes program is the vegetable smoothies that they advise. But other than that, I think this artificial restriction. For example, if I tell somebody to stop breathing for some time, 30 seconds, you will stop breathing, but after 30 seconds, you will have to catch up. Similarly, if you tell patients to follow any artificial diet, they will be able to follow with great determination. But after that, what we call the hunger hormones, there are a lot of hormones which regulate appetite. Leptin, resistin, orexin, cytokines, all these hormones, ghrelin, all these hormones are there. And when a patient artificially starves, these hormones will come in and try to, after 6 months or 1 year, they will push the patient to again eat food. It's not a bad thing. For example, if somebody has TB, the weight comes down. If you treat with anti-TB medicine, the weight comes back. Why does the weight come back? Because the appetite hormones force the patient to eat and the weight becomes normal. That's a normal phenomenon. If after TB patient continues to lose weight, then that patient will never recover. But when you artificially reduce by using, say, vegan diets or intermittent fasting diet, if you're artificially starving, hunger hormones will kick in, and one day, like a dam, the appetite will come back, and the dam will burst, the appetite will come back, the patient's sugars will all come back. What you will find is that patient was 90 kilos. With all these fad diets, patient's weight came down to 80 kilos. But after 2 years, the weight is now at 100 kilos. And we as doctors or clinical pharmacists will have to deal with this situation. So I am against all sorts of unnatural fad diets. And I think a healthy home diet with macronutrients and micronutrients and all the vitamins and minerals is the best common sense way to treat diabetes right now. Yes, an occasional patient may respond to the freedom from diabetes program. Another occasional patient may respond to the Dikshit diet. But if they respond and they're doing well, that's fine. But it's not a treatment for everybody. One size does not fit all, and we have to be choosy in recommending something. That's my view, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I mean, that did answer my intermittent diet and Dikshit diet, which would have been my other question. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we will move forward now.
Thank you.
Since we have restricted time, we will move to the next part of the program, which is a short video of our showing the 2-week journey. Moving towards the closing of the program, I now request Professor Bijoy Panda to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon, one and all. It is an honor to have been asked to offer vote of thanks after such a long 2 weeks of QIP, which was probably, I hope, was informative and was a successful one, which had included many international as well as national speakers contributing their insightful knowledge. So I would like to thank the guest of honor, Saili Masal, Registrar MSPC, and Chief Guest, Dr. Rahul Somani, Head PV Allen Lab, for their graceful words and insights and their guidance. I am also very much thankful for today's valedictory Chief Guest, Dr. A.G. Unnikrishnan, CEO, Chelaram Hospital, who has really provided us with information like technology can be used in treatment and how far we could go ahead in that. I should not forget about those demonstrators who have shown up their skills of using this technology like Micromedics, Lexicom, and various other Clinirex in our pharmacy profession, and how that could be valuable enough to provide information related to drugs and patient care. I am very grateful as well to all the speakers, because without them, the knowledge sharing would not have happened. And moreover, I should not forget the participants, because both of them are the sides of a coin, two sides of a coin. So the knowledge exchange takes place from the speakers to the participants and vice versa. So both of their presence is a very much a requirement for successful conduct of such conferences or QIPs, quality improvement programs. I should not forget my students like Ayush, who has been the whole 2 weeks has been giving a technical support. Brushali and Shutansu for flyer design and brochure design, Ritika, then Jilu and Noor, Sabah for contributing in content writing, as well as Subham for online uploading of those contents. Finally, I would like to thank the management for providing us, our university management as well as the college management for providing us this facility for successful conduct of this QIP program. I am very much grateful to our principal in charge, Sir Dr. A.P. Pawar sir, and vice principals Dr. V.B. Pokharkar and J.R. Rao madam for their continuous guidance, for which this QIP was a successful event. I should not forget my colleagues, the staff members who contributed a lot in making this event a successful one. And at the end, I would like to thank all of them who were directly or indirectly involved in making this 2 weeks a long QIP session a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Panda sir. To close the program, I request everyone to kindly switch on their videos so we can take a screenshot for our memories. So, thank you once again, Unnikrishnan sir. Thank you all.
Thank you all.